All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
This is a quasi-judicial hearing for ordinance 2021-05, single-family residence rezoning application for annex property located at 2924 South Peninsula Drive. Do you have to read that?
Yeah, so this is an ordinance, so I will read it, yes. And this is ordinance 2021-05, an ordinance of the City of Daytona Beach, Volusia County, Florida, assigning the RSF2 urban single-family residential detached district zoning classification to annex single-family residential property generally located at 2924 South Peninsula Drive, for tax parcel ID 5327-09-00-0200, providing modification of the official zoning map, providing for implementing administrative actions, providing for non-codification, and for ratification.
Stuart? Can you sell us on this?
We'll see. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So as the board knows and have seen, good morning, by the way, this is ordinance 2021-05, which is a rezoning for an annexed-in property located at 2924 South Peninsula Drive. So when I say an annexed-in property, I mean the property is actually going through the annexation process, the voluntary annexation process pursuant to Florida statutes with the City Council. So we're not here to discuss annexation today. We're here to discuss the rezoning for this particular ordinance 2021-05. So as I noted earlier, the property is located at 2924 South Peninsula Drive. The property owner, applicant, and I have the developer there, but they're not really developing the property, is Shane McGill and Erica Smith, and the property size is just over a third of an acre. The current zoning for the property is Volusia County R3 Urban Single Family Residential District. And the reason for that is because, as I mentioned earlier, it's going through the process currently in the county, and it's going through the process. It's already had one read-in for annexing the shores, and the second reading is actually going to be later this month on June 22nd. So after June 22nd, it will be officially in the City of Daytona Beach Shores. So the proposed zoning for this particular property is Daytona Beach Shores RSF-2, which is also our urban single-family residential detached district, and the proposed entitlement is the same as it currently is, meaning a single-family residence. So once it leaves the county and it comes into the shores and the zoning and the future land use that you'll see on the agenda later today is completed, the only entitlement that will be for this property is the same, which is basically to have a single-family residence there. So in terms of an impact summary analysis, you'll see in your staff report, board members, I did a thorough analysis of water, sewer, all those different things that we typically do whenever there's a future land use or a rezoning change. And you'll see that there's absolutely no change in there. And essentially what we're trying to do is just change the color on the zoning map for this property into a specific color for Daytona Beach Shores. So this is the location map of the property. You'll see that it's not too far from the Halifax River, which is to the east on your screen. And it's along South Peninsula Avenue, just across from the Cloverleaf North, right here in Daytona Beach Shores. So as I mentioned, all we're trying to do through this process and through this ordinance is to add a color, and you'll see that it looks like a yellow color that we're going to add to the map, which will give it the zoning entitlement. Right now, because it's in the county, it basically has no color, meaning unclassified, because it's in Volusia County. But if you were to look at the Volusia County map, they would have their own color assigned to it. But what we're doing with Daytona Beach Shores map is to add our yellow to it, which would give it the RSF-2 designation. So this is an aerial view of the property at 2924 South Peninsula. And you can see Cloverleaf North just a little bit to the bottom of it. You see South Peninsula Drive in between the two. This is a street view of the property. I just took this picture, I believe it was sometime 2 weeks ago. And you can see to the left corner, that's a sign advertising this meeting for the rezoning of the future land use, not the annexation, because the annexation isn't required to come here pursuant to state law. Staff is recommending approval for this, and the reason why staff is recommending approval is because there's absolutely no change. Now, I do know that the property owner, they live up north right now, I believe it's Connecticut, and they're going to be moving down here on August 1st. They have homesteaded the property, and they have rented out the property on several occasions because they have two mortgages. The property up north apparently is under contract, and they'll be selling soon, but they'll be moving down here, I was told, full-time August 1st. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those. But again, this is just a like-for-like change from Volusia County to Daytona Beach Shores from the zoning standpoint. Any questions for staff? Yes, sir.
Mr. Cruz, do you know the zoning of the surrounding properties? Are they all single-family residential?
Yes, sir.
And they are in the county, the
Yes.
adjoining properties?
Yes, yes. On the north, south, and east, it's all Volusia County R3 zoning, which is basically the same as our RSF-2, which we're assigning to this property, if approved by the board and the council.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion from a member?
I move to recommend the approval of ordinance 2021-05 as presented.
Before we have motions, this is a public hearing, so we need to open it up for members. Comment.
Any floor members have a comment?
Do we get to hear, somebody's raising their hand out there?
Yeah, that's what I had just noted, is that this is a public hearing, so members of the public need to be invited to comment.
So, which is the chairman is asking board members, or should he ask,
Well, we should put on hold the motion for now.
put on?
Motion is on hold.
Until the public hearing,
Okay.
and then ask for public comment. And
Any
once
public
the public is
comment?
done commenting, then we can have a motion.
Please state your name.
Lorraine Geiger, 4 Oceans West Boulevard. Let me preface what I'm about to say with, I do recommend that we go ahead and annex this property. We have all these enclaves on Peninsula that we would like to see as part of the shores. I just want to go on record as saying that I watched what Erica Smith said at the council meeting last week. And as Stuart alluded to, she has been renting it out. And the picture that Sherry had there, you can see how close the Cloverleaf North is to that property. And there's been rentals with lots of noise. And if she moves there and lives there, that's fine. But I just want to correct what she said at the council meeting, that she had not been renting it out. She has.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
What length of,
A week at a time, I would say, during Bike Week and special events especially. And, you know, everybody that lives in my bank of condos gets to listen to it. So that's why.
Stuart, do you know how long they've owned the property?
A year, July last year.
Okay.
And they did receive a letter from the county. Is that correct, Stuart?
The city?
From
Oh,
the
the
county?
Yes, the county. Whenever you're done, I'll go up and finish.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
so she's owned it for a year, okay? And during that whole period of time, she has continually, they've lived in Connecticut, and she's continually renting it out. You're
I wouldn't say every week, but it's been very steady, and a lot of us have been complaining. And when I called the county the day after the county council meeting, when they said, when they reinforced their 30-day rental policy for residential zoning, I was not the first that had called and complained.
So there's been numerous complaints.
Yes, but as far as I know, only one letter has been sent out to her, which she said she had heard no complaints at the council meeting last week.
She the owner.
Yes, she, Erica Shane. Shane McGill was not there.
Okay. So it's been mainly, I hate to keep going on, so it's mainly been families that have been coming in during the year.
Well, when Stuart drove by there the last week, now there's been nobody there since she's been to council, I will say that. There were 4 pickup trucks and 2 SUVs in the driveway.
Okay.
Bike Week, there were multiple cars. There was a tent And there were many motorcycles there. And, you know, in the middle of the night, it gets pretty noisy.
Sure.
If Sherry would put that picture back up, and you can see we are the bank of condos that are the closest to that residence. So we get to hear what goes on. And you hate to call the police in the middle of the night for nuisance partying or whatever, because you know it's probably not going to last forever. But
So the Shores Police Department has been called. I believe the sheriff, or would be the sheriff or the sheriff,
well, that's another reason that we would like them annexed, you know, because you want your friends close and your enemies closer. And we know with the Shores, that they will take care of it. And if there were numerous complaints to our code enforcement, I wouldn't want Gwen on me every week, you know? So I think it's a good thing in the long run, but I'm a little suspicious of her because of what she said last week at the council meeting.
I did hear that. I was present at last week's council meeting, so.
But if you see that picture there where that catty-cornered section is, that's where I live. One of my neighbors is with me today. She got to hear it too. And, you know, we're an 8-story condo, and we live there because we have yearly rentals also. We choose to not be around short-term rentals. And a lot of condos in the Daytona Beach Shores area, of course, have short-term rentals, as we all know, which can be a problem. But we don't want all those residents turning into party houses.
Nice area, yes.
Yes,
It is a
very
nice
nice
area.
area.
So we're only told that our plans are to come down here in August of this year.
Right.
Right.
And if the trend continues the way it is, you know, like I say, it's nice and quiet over there this week, so.
And we want to keep it that way.
Yes.
Right, okay. That's all I have.
Anybody else?
Stuart?
Well,
Stuart, yeah.
if Ms. Geiger is finished, then I can address any questions that the board may have. John, what's the best way to do it? To have other members of the public speak first, or should I just go ahead and answer the questions that the board may have now?
Yeah, let's finish out the public hearing and then you can address them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Does your
volunteering.
neighbor want to talk?
No, I'm fine. She said everything.
So what questions does the board have for me?
Are we absolutely sure she's moving in August?
There is no way to be certain about that, Mr. Chair. This is just what she was told what she told me, and she told the city council last Tuesday night.
Thank you.
So that was only verbally she stated that. I was at the council, I'll say it again. I was here. I heard her say, I think very slightly, because I was in the back here, that she was coming down here. But, you know, we hope, you know. And then she would assume that she will not rent it out after that.
I believe
touch on that issue.
After she moves in, that they're not planning to rent it out after they move in on August 1st. That's what I recall, and I don't know if Sherry's memory is a little bit better than mine. I don't want to put her in the spot. She doesn't like to be in the spotlight, but that's what she said at the council meeting. So one thing I just want to clarify real quickly, board members, is that Ms. Geiger is absolutely correct. You know, if that property were to annex into the Shores, come June 22nd, June 23rd, the possibility of the Shores having a greater impact on nuisances, because it's not the use per se, because in Daytona Beach Shores, you may know, unless you're in a condo association or a subdivision or homeowners association, you know, you're basically allowed to have short-term rentals anywhere in Daytona Beach Shores, because the state precludes us from regulating short-term rentals. However, when it comes to nuisances, you know, the loud noises, you know, the whatever happens during bike week or whatever, you know, those things could be considered as nuisances and even disturbing the peace. And, you know, I'll leave it up to John because he's the attorney, but, you know, I certainly think that any member of the community, whether they're in the Shores or in the county, can certainly call the law enforcement officials if there is a disturbance of the peace, and that issue could be addressed quickly. And if there's a continuance of that and there's documented evidence, you know, Ms. Geiger said it herself, you know, I mean, she wouldn't want, and I wouldn't want Gwen to be all over any issue that I'm doing, because Daytona Beach Shores has a very good reputation in terms of dealing with code enforcement issues, whereas with the county is so large and their staff is so, they're so small, you know, it's very, very difficult to get a good response time out of the county. They're good at what they do, but unfortunately, because the region is so large, you know, their hands are kind of tied in terms of, you know, when they can get to an issue and how to deal with it.
Clarification to that, currently, under Volusia County, they can rent it, but 1 month at a time, correct?
So I don't want to speak about the county regulations. I just know from what I've read in the staff reports, heard in the council meetings, and read in the paper, and I do know that up to prior to the last council meeting that they had when they discussed this issue, the county was allowing short-term rentals in single-family zoning district, although it somewhat contradicted what their code said. But at that county council meeting, they decided to take no action. Now, what does take no action mean? I don't know.
So my point is that we're gonna have no control over the short-term rentals regardless. But as far as a nuisance, you know, our police department is more,
Code enforcement,
it's actually,
more equipped, I would say.
exactly. So that basically, that's gonna be the difference. It's not gonna be really any limitations on their rental.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
And just for clarification, board members, and John can attest to this as well, you know, this particular zoning request, you know, has no impact or no relationship with the short-term rental or use of the property. Our hands as Daytona Beach Shores, the city of Daytona Beach Shores, are tied due to the state legislation that was passed in 2011.
Anything else? Can I have a motion from?
Well, first, can I just say, can you first close public hearing?
Yep.
And then, I don't remember you asking if there were any ex parte communications regarding this application. So you should all disclose any ex parte communications that you've had.
Have there been any ex parte? No. Okay, can I now have a motion?
Thank you.
I'll move to recommend approval of ordinance 2021-05 as presented.
Second.
Sherry?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Yeah, we can do that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Next would be the special exception SPEX 12021005 regarding the El Caribe Resort West Side Overflow Parking at 2128 South Atlantic Avenue. Stuart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. This particular application, is SPX 12021-005, the El Caribe Resort Westside Overflowing Parking at 2122 through 2128 South Atlantic Avenue. So you just heard the proposed location or address for the special exception, board members. The applicant, owner, developer is Century Nationwide Properties LLC, which also owns the El Caribe property. So this property is on the west side of South Atlantic Avenue, and El Caribe, as you know, is on the east side of South Atlantic Avenue. The west side property is 1.47 acres, and it has a dual zoning. Right now, the front part of the property, meaning the part that's closest to Atlantic Avenue, South Atlantic Avenue, is GCRD, which is our General Commercial Redevelopment District, and the back half of the property is RMF-2, which is our Multifamily Residential Medium Density District. The current use in the property is vacant. There's a vacant commercial building, two-story building. You may recall it as the old arcade building, and also there's an improved parking lot. This site, you may recall, was actually a go-kart track, an arcade amusement type establishment many years ago. So the proposed use is for overflow parking for the El Caribe Resort, 38 parking spaces. You may have seen in the staff report, board members, that there was an analysis done. There's several sections, and at some point in time, we might want to clean this up, but there's several sections in the code with regards to analysis that should be applied to parking for special exceptions in the GCRD district and the RMF2 district. And you'll see that all of those, I believe it's 30 criteria when you add them up. 28 of them are fully met based on staff's analysis, and 2 are partially met. And the 2 that are partially met regards screening. And I'll show you in a moment what those refer to. So when you look at the location map, as I mentioned earlier, the site, which is in red here, is the old go-kart arcade track property that's owned by the El Khoury, basically Central Nationwide Properties LLC. And on the west side, the east side, you see the El Khoury Resort. So just for orientation purposes, the old car wash, this property is just south of that. And it's just north of where the Mets and east side grill is located. So the screening that I was referring to, essentially the code requires that for special exceptions, there's screening all around the property. But essentially, you see this green circle that you have here in the middle of the property. This is where there's no screening. And the reason why there's no screening there is because the property is also owned by the property owner, Central Nationwide's LLC, and the property actually has a drive-through. Actually, the circle is in the wrong spot. It actually should be over here. I apologize. Yeah, so basically there's a parking lot connection which is owned by the property owner, and this parking lot connection has an access point to the Winn-Dixie Plaza, which is just south right here. So basically, someone from the Winn-Dixie Plaza can drive onto the property through this parking lot and park here and go to the Beachside Grill or to the offices, or they can continue through this property here. So I apologize for locating that green circle in the wrong spot. But basically, that's the only property, only portion of the property where there's no screening. So this is a street view of the property. This is a 2-story old arcade building. The car wash is just to the right over here. You obviously can't see that, but you can see that the property, it has an improved parking lot, and essentially this is where all the parking is going to be, all the way to the back here. The property owner is proposing landscaping in this area here to basically additionally comply with the screening requirements for the code. And if you look at the property here, all the way to the back, especially along the areas of the property lines that abut residential properties, there is actual screening. I believe it's a 6-foot-high wooden fence, and then there's also a combination of other screening on the southwest corner as well. So this looks like a very noisy plan, but essentially all I'm trying to show you on this plan is, and for orientation purposes, this is South Atlantic Avenue, and this would be the driveway onto the property. You can see all the parking spaces that currently exist around the property, so there's not much improvement needed at all on this property. As I mentioned earlier, the property owner is going to put some landscaping here along South Atlantic Avenue, but something that also must be said is that the property owner is also adding 2 additional parking spaces in this area here to the north, and he will provide ADA access from the back entrance to this building here, and also to the front entrance. In the event that there's a future use of this property, it just makes sense to go ahead and plan this out from now on. So basically, the property is improved already, and all that's being added or done is for the overflow parking to be added. And the overflow parking basically is for employees and obviously, guests on the west side El Khoury property. So staff is recommending approval. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those. I know that we have a representative from the property owner here. I provided all the different testing criteria and the staff's reflection of those in the staff report. If there's any questions about any of those, I'll be happy to take those, but those are documented for the record. Yes, sir.
You indicated there was going to be 40 spaces?
38.
38, and then 2 handicaps?
Yes.
Is that the appropriate ratio?
So for overflow parking, there's not a requirement for that. Actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. So if it's open to the public, there has to be ADA parking, and the 2 parking spaces is indeed correct, because it's 1 for every 25, if I'm correct, right, Joe? Correct.
One for every 25?
Correct. 1 ADA parking for every 25, yes. Good question. You almost caught me off guard.
So they do qualify, because we're always very conscientious of the new ADA rules and everything else. Just want to make sure that we're in compliance.
Correct.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So the existing parking is blacktopped. What's going to happen with the green areas? They're going to be blacktopped also?
No, the green areas remain the same.
Okay, so they're just messing with the blacktopped area.
Correct.
What about the drive-through from Winn-Dixie Plaza?
They're not touching that either.
So that somebody could still do that?
Somebody can still drive from Winn-Dixie to the parking lot on the backside of Beachside Grill. Correct.
Okay. Just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any comments from the audience?
Before we do audience comments, you should disclose ex partes and allow the applicant to.
Any ex parte communications on this subject? No. No.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Joe Hopkins. I'm an engineer with the Performance Group in Daytona Beach, on Marina Point Drive. I have the pleasure of representing Century Properties in this request. Good question. The handicap parking is met for the site itself. One handicap space for the first 25. After 25, it's another handicap. And that requirement for handicap kind of escalates, not parallel with the number of stalls. It kind of tapers off after you get over 100, 200 spaces. But what we did is we allocated parking on site. In the event the amusement building is ever occupied, we reserved enough parking on the site, or allocated enough parking so that the amusement building would be in compliance with its parking requirements. So that gives us about a surplus of 27 stalls, more or less, that can be utilized by the hotel. Currently, the hotel has 115 rooms, and the parking requirement established by the city is one space for every room plus one for the manager. That's 116 stalls, and that's exactly what we have on site. It doesn't really provide for the employees that are coming in. We're bringing employees in now from all different areas to try to maintain our employee staff for maintenance of the hotel rooms and so forth. So the parking requirement, even though it's established by the city, is actually a little bit deficient for our operational purposes. So if there's any questions, it's a pretty simple request. There is no improvements that are needed except for the landscape buffer. We want to improve that buffer along A1A and have that come into compliance as well with the city's landscape buffer requirements. If there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have one, just, will any employees be parking, or did I miss it, across the street there?
Oh, yes, sir, they will.
They will be. How about, approximately, what do you think? You told me you're bringing in a number of employees.
I'd say probably 10.
May I just finish that question? Because they're driving from distance, because sometimes when I drive by there, I see a lot of the housekeeping staff waiting for buses, to take the buses, so.
Not to get too deep into their business, but they're
Right.
actually bringing employees from out of the country. And it's become that dire a situation for maintenance staff and so forth. And the concentration is usually in the morning, before checkout. So that's where we really have kind of an overlap between hotel occupants and then maintenance staff. We just have an overlap, that's what happens. So it would first be used by the staff, and then second for any guest overflow, whether there's trailers or overflow staff. Weekend like this past weekend, you can only fit half a truck in one of those stalls. So, kind of gets overflowed, but anyway. Any other questions?
Last time I did something with parking lots, every 10 stalls you have to have an island. Is that applicable to this?
It's every 12, correct. And the way the site is right now, they meet that requirement.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other comments from the audience?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I have a motion on this?
I move to approve special exception SPEX 1202-1005 as presented.
I second.
The next item is ordinance 2.
Mr. Chair?
We get,
Oh,
got a
sorry.
vote.
I'm in a
All
hurry.
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous vote, thank you.
The next item is ordinance 2021-04, comprehensive plan, future land use map amendment for annexing single-family residential property located at 2924 South Peninsula Drive.
This is ordinance number 2021-04, excuse me. An ordinance of the City of Daytona Beach Shores, Volusia County, Florida, relating to comprehensive planning, amending the City of Daytona Beach Shores comprehensive plan, amending Chapter 1, future land use element by amending map L-4 entitled Generalized Future Land Use Map 2030, assigning the residential low-intensity future land use designation to annex single-family residential property generally located at 2924 South Peninsula Drive. Short tax parcel ID 5327-09-00-0200, providing for planning actions, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for non-codification, and providing an effective date.
Stewart?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this regards the same property that's being annexed into the City of Daytona Beach Shores. You know, typically whenever a property leaves a county, unincorporated county, into a local government, into a local jurisdiction, not only the zoning designation has to be changed, but also the comprehensive plan, future land use map designation has to change, and they both have to be compatible. And that's the reason why we're going through this process right now. So I'm not going to get into too much detail about this. You're pretty familiar with the property. But as you can see on the third bullet to the bottom, the current future land use for this particular property is urban, low-intensity Volusia County, and the proposed future land use would be Daytona Beach Shores residential low-intensity, and they're essentially the same thing, with the proposed entitlement being for one single-family residence on the property. As I mentioned earlier, the property is located at 2924 South Blank Avenue, and the property owners are Shane McGill and Erica Smith. And so, again, there is an impact analysis that is in your staff report, the plan analysis. There's essentially no changes that would be made from the county to the shores in terms of changing the future land use map designation for this property, just like the zoning. So essentially what we're trying to do, and again, you see the map here to the bottom where the arrows are, because it's currently in the county, there's not a color assigned to it, but whenever it gets into the city, and if the city approves the future land use map amendment, this property here will have a color, and that color is the low-density residential property color, which is like a very light yellow color, which would allow it to maintain a single-family residential status. It's not going to give them additional density or anything like that. Basically, it's like for like. And so, because it's fairly simple, staff is recommending approval of this particular ordinance and land use change. Is there any question for staff? Thank you.
Any comments from the audience? Any ex parte communications?
Very good, Chuck.
They're like letters.
I got that one. Can we have a motion, please?
Okay, no, your turn.
I don't have it in front of me. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, I can't find the
can't find
appropriate
it.
wording, but I'll go ahead, being that I don't find the appropriate wording on the staff, but to pass motion, and I'll read it out. Ordinance number 2021-04. As presented. So,
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Saved and passed.
Any discussions from the board? Any comments? Meeting's closed.